Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here at the Trauma and Addiction Recovery Center. This is going to be the first video in a series of 8 where we're going to talk about boundaries. Particularly, we're going to talk about boundaries for partners of sex and porn addicts. And this will be a series of 8. And in this series, we're just going to explore what are boundaries? How do I know what my boundaries are? How do I communicate those to other people? What are kind of the principles underlying good, strong, healthy boundaries? Being in a relationship with a sex or a porn addict can be quite crazy making sometimes. The addiction, any addiction, but particularly sex and porn addiction, often comes along with a lot of deceptions and lies and gaslighting. And for someone trying to make sense out of what's going on, someone trying to decipher what certain behaviors mean, someone who's discovering over and over again that they've been deceived or betrayed. And oftentimes, these partners have been discovering this over a period of years or even decades. And so that can create quite a bit of just confusion and frustration, of course. And even just, I've heard many partners talk about just feeling foggy all the time, just feeling like they can't think straight. They can't get clarity on what is reality. And that makes sense when you're living with someone who's trying to confuse your reality on a regular basis. So we're going to help partners kind of get refocused and kind of focus on what's happening inside of them with their boundaries and what do they need to do to take care of themselves. So what is a boundary? You may have heard that saying, boundaries are where you end and where I begin. And I think that's a good definition of a boundary. I also like to think of a map. Maps are a really great example of boundaries because when you look at a map, you're seeing a lot of borders, a lot of boundaries that indicate, for example, what's the United States, what's Canada, or what's the United States and what's Mexico, or what is Tennessee versus what is Kentucky or Georgia. That those lines kind of denote the boundaries of certain states or countries or cities or towns or counties. And those lines tell us a lot of things, including whose property is that, including who's responsible for what happens within those lines, and also whose job is it not to take care of what's inside those lines. And that's very similar to our personal boundaries. Our personal boundaries kind of help us know what's ours and what's not ours. So the way I like to define a boundary is what I will or won't do to take care of myself and my responsibilities. So my boundaries are what I will and won't do to take care of myself and my responsibilities. And I really like that word, responsibilities. I like to actually divide it up into responsibilities. And it's a good reminder to me that I have the ability to respond to the things that are in my life that are my job to respond to, that are my job to take care of. And though the actions I take around that, those are my boundaries. Sometimes when we are thinking about boundaries, it's helpful to kind of break it down a little bit. And one helpful way to think about it is internal boundaries and external boundaries. So let's just talk about external boundaries first here. So I'm defining external boundaries as are the boundaries that govern how I'm going to take care of myself and my responsibilities with people, places, and things outside of me. And so there's a lot of ways, a lot of categories that could fall under this idea of external boundaries. For our purposes of really looking at how boundaries intersect with partners of sex addicts and porn addicts, we're going to look at 3 types of external boundaries that can be really helpful for a partner to begin exploring in her early recovery. And so the first one is just physical space boundaries. And for a partner in early recovery, this can look like needing more space, especially if it's after a discovery that a partner may need more space to be able to get her thoughts straight, figure out what she needs, express her feelings. She may need just time away and more space from her addicted loved one. This could look like an in-house separation. It might look like an out-of-house separation where the partner or the addicted loved one move out for a period of time, usually temporary. It also may look like the partner just doesn't want to be touched. She doesn't want physical affection. She doesn't really want hugs or any kind of physical touch, holding hands, that kind of thing from her addicted loved one. And those are her physical boundaries. Another area of external boundaries that partners often have to be aware of is sexual boundaries. Um, Especially after a discovery, what are her sexual boundaries? And partners are often confused about this. Some partners are really clear. I don't want to be sexual with my addicted loved one. It's not something not interested in that. Other partners have a harder time figuring out how to take care of herself in this area. One of the things at the Trauma and Addiction Recovery Center that we always recommend is that partners get STD tested or STI tested to just be sure that she's safe. And we also recommend that if the partner is going to be sexual with the addicted loved one, that she also make sure he gets tested before she would be engaging in sexual behavior with him, and that he would show her the results of that testing. So that's just a really good self-care, healthy boundary for a partner in this early stage of their process. Other sexual boundaries just may include when I'll be sexual, how I'll be sexual, with whom I'll be sexual. And so partners often kind of have to navigate this. Some partners have a history of just feeling guilt or shame about her sexual behavior, where she may have joined her addicted loved one in some sexual behavior that now she wishes that she hadn't, like watching porn with him or doing some other sexual behavior that he really wanted to do, but she didn't really feel comfortable with. And so partners often have to kind of negotiate that and figure out where they stand and how they feel about those things. And a therapist can be really helpful, especially one who understands sex addiction can be helpful in just walking with the partner as she's figuring these things out for herself. So the final thing we'll talk about with external boundaries is time boundaries. So for a partner who's just discovered her loved one's acting out behaviors and is dealing with the trauma of that betrayal, time boundaries can also be really important. And one of the things we often recommend at the Trauma and Addiction Recovery Center is that partners and newly recovering addicts don't make any big decisions for even up to a year. Sometimes partners don't feel like they can really do that long, so they might choose 6 months. But really, ideally, that neither the addicted loved one or the partner, the betrayed partner, would make any major decisions for a year. And that includes not getting a divorce. It also includes not deciding to stay married. That the partner and the addicted loved one just puts that question on hold. It's not something that's on the table right now to be decided. It also includes not moving, not taking a job in another state, or not starting a college degree, or not making any major decisions for that year, while both the partner and the addicted loved one get a good foundation under them with their recovery, where they really get some support on board, they really get some traction with their recovery, and they're actually able to see recovery happening in their personal life and also in their relationship. So that's an example of a time boundary that we often recommend partners kind of adopt in their early recovery process. So now we're going to switch to talking about internal boundaries. And the way I define internal boundaries are that they govern how I take care of myself and my responsibilities within my own skin. So that anything inside my skin, it is my job to respond to. Anything that's happening inside my skin, I have the ability to, and it's my job to respond to it. So when I say responsibilities, I don't mean that everything that's happening inside my skin is my fault. I mean that everything that's happening in my skin is my job to respond to. I hope that makes sense. So we're going to talk about a few different kinds of internal boundaries here, a few different types. And of course, there's many we could talk about, but I just selected a few that seem pertinent to partners of sex addicts. So one is just physical well-being. So it is my job to take care of my physical well-being. And this might be as simple as we've already mentioned, getting STD testing and making sure that I'm taking care of that. It also may look like taking care of medical problems that I may have neglected, or taking care of getting my annual exams that I may have neglected while trying to figure out what was happening with my addictive loved one, or trying to just take care of the kids, or whatever it is that life got in the way. So good physical boundaries, physical well-being boundaries, include taking care of my medical needs. It also includes taking care of my nutrition, taking care of my physical activity, especially when I'm going through something as difficult and painful and maybe even chaotic and crisis oriented as the discovery that my loved one has been acting out, either having affairs or with pornography or some other behavior. When I'm trying to get through something like that, something that's traumatic like that, the way I take care of my body is going to help me or is going to slow me down in that process. So, taking care of my nutrition needs, taking care of my exercise needs are really important, just to help me regulate my mood, help me regulate my anxiety, just help me stay healthy, and help my body to stay well as I'm going through this crisis. So, another example of internal boundaries are my thoughts and beliefs. And so, again, I can't always control what thoughts may come up inside of me, but I can respond to it. So if I notice that I'm having a lot of negative or shaming thoughts, which partners of sex addicts frequently have negative and shaming thoughts about themselves and about other people, but they may have a lot of shaming thoughts about themselves, like, if I were prettier, then he wouldn't have had an affair, or if I just had sex more often, then he wouldn't need to look at pornography, or whatever the kind of I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable, or if he really loved me, then he wouldn't have done those behaviors. And so when a partner starts finding herself thinking like that, it's important to intervene and respond to that and start doing some things that are going to be helpful to kind of interrupt those just negative shaming thought loops that can take over, and then suddenly we're in a spiral of despair. So one tool that's helpful is just using affirmations. Have a list of affirmations, and if you need help, you can Google that affirmations online, or again, talk to a therapist who's knows how to treat sex addiction and knows how to treat betrayal trauma, and get help with developing affirmations that would be useful for you, and then use them every day, multiple times a day. Also, having safe people to talk to can be really helpful here. So interrupting those negative thought patterns is really important, especially in early recovery. It's also important just to educate yourself about what is betrayal trauma, and to educate yourself about what is sex addiction and how do those things come to be in my world, and educate yourself about, are there any historical issues that might have come into your marriage or into your relationship that might be contributing to sex addiction, or might be contributing to what you're experiencing now in your trauma. So really getting some good education about these issues and how to recover from these issues is really important. And another thing that I can't stress enough is just stay in reality. This can be one of the hardest things for partners of sex addicts, that for many of these people, they've been living with someone who's been lying to them for so long that they've lost track of reality. And when they think something is happening and then they're told something different, and they start questioning themselves, like, well, maybe I didn't see what I saw, or maybe I misunderstood that, or maybe it's not as big a deal as I think it is. And so it's really important to stay in reality. And partners who've been betrayed in this way, there's a lot of ways you can do that. One thing I often recommend to partners is just to make a list, write down, what do I know is real? What did I actually see? What did I hear? What were the dates that this happened? What time did it happen? And keep a list of reality. And then if you need to, when you need to, pull out that list and give yourself a reality check. Like, no, this really happened. I really did catch him having that affair. I really did see that message on his text, or whatever it is. Just have that list so that you can kind of check yourself when you start self-doubting. Another thing to do is to have, again, safe people who also know about sex addiction, who can help reflect reality back to you. People who know your story and who can say, but you said the other day, and are able to repeat back to you things that you said, experiences that you told them about. And so you can kind of get a reality check from those people who love you. So thirdly, I want to talk about feelings and emotions, and internal boundaries with our feelings and emotion. And again, for somebody who just discovered a partner who's been acting out, our feelings and emotions can be all over the place. We may rage, or we may be depressed. Maybe we can't get out of bed. We can just have all kinds of feelings all over the spectrum. And it can be hard to have good boundaries with those feelings. Those feelings may leak out or even explode out towards someone else, including the addicted loved one. And so it's important to have ways to just respond to your feelings in a way that's safe and take responsibility for them in a way that's safe. And so have safe ways to express your feelings, including having loved ones that you can call and just vent to, and they don't need to fix it. They don't need to take it on. There's nothing they need to do to fix you, but you're just calling them and asking them to listen to you, and that you can say whatever it is you need to say, and they're not going to judge you. Another thing that might be helpful is doing some journaling or writing. Some people find that really helpful when they're having big, strong feelings. Sometimes when our feelings are overwhelming and maybe a lot of anger or even rage, it can be helpful to listen to loud, angry music. That can be helpful. It can be helpful to get our body moving, go for a fast walk or a jog, or dance really hard to music. It might be helpful just to get in your car and drive to an empty parking lot and just scream as loud as you can for as long as you need to. Or some people find it useful to have a tennis racket or a broom handle that they can hit their bed with. Just some ways that are safe for you to get some of the feelings out of your body. I usually talk with partners about 3 rules around having big, strong feelings. One is it's not okay to hurt yourself. So no matter how big or strong your feelings are, it's not okay to hurt yourself, like punch a wall or pull your hair or cut yourself or anything like that. That's not okay. It's also not okay to hurt anyone else. Punch them, kick them, throw things at them. That also would not be okay. And it's not okay to damage property without permission, especially if it's not your property. So that's also not okay. And if you're expressing those big, loud feelings, it's important to make sure that if anyone is around, that it's only people who are not affected by your feelings. Meaning it's not your addicted loved one who has hurt you so badly that you're raging at. It's also your children are around to hear you with these big, loud feelings that might scare them, that they might not understand. So it's important to just use your feelings, and use your emotional expression in a safe way that's not going to hurt you or anyone else. So finally, I want to talk about our spiritual boundaries as another type of internal boundaries that it's important to just take care of, especially in this early stage of recovering from betrayal trauma. And so it's important, one is just to consider, where do I put my trust? And that can really affect me on a spiritual level. That many partners have just gone from trusting their addicted loved one to being completely betrayed again, to just going right back to trusting them once things kind of have blown over and things seem to return to normal. And so it's important to have some boundaries with your trust. I like Brene Brown talks about the marble jar, and that trust in relationships is kind of like filling up a marble jar, and that those marbles get put in one at a time as things happen and you see that somebody is trustworthy, but also they can be dumped out in a heartbeat when, for example, you discover, oh, there's been another affair. Well, that marble jar is pretty close to empty if you've just had a discovery. And it's going to take time to put some of those marbles back in. Unfortunately, it's a lot harder to put the marbles in than it is to dump them all out. And so it's okay to have those boundaries around your trust, that you are going to take your time, you're going to stay in reality, and it's going to take time for your loved one to earn trust back as you observe his recovery and see what's happening in his recovery. And so that means that on a spiritual level, you're probably going to struggle with, where do I find safety? Where do I find a sense of safety? Because it's not coming from my addicted loved one. I don't even trust him. And this is okay to struggle with this on a spiritual level. Let yourself struggle with, where am I going to find safety? And there's just a hint that it's not going to come from outside of you. It's not going to come from your addicted loved one or anyone else, frankly, that your sense of safety really part of your recovery journey is, how do I find that sense of safety within me? And maybe with a higher power or God, or however that makes sense to you, but on a spiritual level, that my sense of safety is no longer dependent on people outside of me, especially my sense of safety that I'm loved, lovable, worthy. And the other thing in this area is to practice things that are spiritually meaningful to you. What helps you connect spiritually? Is it being outside in nature? Is it going for a hike? Is it taking hot baths? Is it praying or journaling? Is it meditating? Or maybe there's a whole mixture of things that are meaningful to you that help you connect spiritually. And so go ahead and honor those as part of your taking care of your spiritual self. Go ahead and honor those things that are meaningful to you on a spiritual level. And above all, part of recovering from betrayal trauma is learning to be aligned with your authentic self and your sense of spirituality, higher power at all times, that you stay aligned with those. And it takes a while to learn how to do that, but that's part of your recovery process as a betrayed partner. That's pretty much what I wanted to talk about as far as boundaries today in this video, is the internal boundaries and external boundaries, and just kind of an introduction to what are boundaries and how do I begin thinking about those in my own life, especially if you're a partner of a sex or porn addict. So in the next 7 videos, we're just going to dive into this a little bit deeper. What are the basic fundamental principles of good, strong, healthy boundaries? So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to actually talk about the basic 5. And the basic 5 is first an acronym for BASIC is an acronym for boundaries are for you, and avoid ultimatums and threats, sustain your boundaries with follow through, influence others by making requests, and change yourself through your boundaries. And so we're going to talk about each of those individually. We'll have a video for each one of those letters of the BASIC acronym. So the final 2 videos will talk about the 5 steps to discovering and communicating your boundaries. And so we'll walk through that and help you kind of get in connection with, what are my personal boundaries? Yeah, people can have all kinds of ideas about boundaries, but what are my personal boundaries, and how do I know what those are? And then how do I establish them? And then how do I talk about them with other people? So we're going to have a couple of videos on that as well. So the next 7 videos will cover the basic 5 of healthy boundaries. So I hope this has been helpful to you. So please watch our next video, where we're going to talk about the B of the basic 5. Boundaries are for you. If you need help creating your own boundaries, or for more information about the Trauma and Addiction Recovery Center, including our treatment programs for men struggling with problematic sexual behavior, or for partners who have experienced betrayal trauma, please visit our website at www.tarkrecovery.com or email us at info@tarkrecovery.com. You can click above to watch the next video in this series on healthy boundaries. We hope you'll also like this video and subscribe to the Trauma and Addiction Recovery Center's channel to continue to receive helpful information about recovering from sexual addiction and betrayal trauma. Thanks for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you next time.